what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. No Will again. He is doing all things spelling bee for his day job. So one more episode without Will. That means I am flying solo, not for the entire episode. We have an interview that I wanted to do for a really long time. Really, really long time. Tom Zbikowski, the former Notre Dame Buffalo Grove High School legend. He is going to join us to talk about really a one-of-one career that he had, what he's up to now. And then we're going to close with the news that Matt Hayes broke about USC not wanting to face LSU in that season opener Sunday night in Vegas. But first, thought it'd be pretty topical to talk about what happened at the SEC meetings and what we can actually take away from that. If you didn't see this, well, you probably just didn't spend any time on the internet, but SEC coaches want to save the walk-on. The House settlement, the future of paying players, has made it a little bit tricky to figure out what future rosters are going to look like when other sports are trying to be accounted for, if we're going to have roster caps. There's a fear that if all are getting some sort of contract on the revenue sharing model, then maybe it has to be scholarship players, or there's just not room for those extra people to be able to kind of fall under that umbrella, which would be the walk-ons. And coaches, to the surprise of no one, do not want rosters trimmed. If there's something that SEC coaches can all agree on, it's that they don't want to get rid of the walk-on program, and not just because it would make Rudy an outdated movie. They talked about how the importance of being able to practice and not necessarily have starters get hurt. That's all kind of obvious. Take that for what it is. There's definitely some truth in that. You don't necessarily want, to be going to be having one-on-one, 1v1 type stuff. That's not the right way to phrase that. First on first, best on best. You get what I'm saying. But there is a desire to be able to preserve walk-on programs for the other obvious reasons. A lot of these guys have been in that spot before. Clark Lee talked about on Feinbaum how he was a walk-on, and those guys are really important pieces to the program. It certainly has played out really well for a program like Georgia, which has the most depth of anyone in college football. But in case you forgot, a certain Stetson Bennett IV may or may not have, but definitely did benefit from the fact that there was a walk-on spot available for him. A guy like Cody Schrader last year, but friend of the program, Grant Morgan. The last three winners of the Burlsworth Award, which goes to the best former walk-on in college football, all went to SEC programs. Baker Mayfield, guy that you might have heard of, had a pretty good little college career, former walk-on. These guys didn't necessarily become the household names as walk-ons. I get it from that standpoint, but you prevent guys like that from being able to even sniff a jersey if you don't have walk-ons available on your roster. And if you can have freelancer contracts at companies with taxes and whatnot that don't fall under the full line of benefits, if it's just about that and about what it's going to look like from a contractual standpoint, I would have to think that they can figure out a way to be able to make this work. It's just going to take some effort. And I get that it costs money to have them on the team. It's not a free expense, though. It's kind of hard to look at all of the expense issues right now, really the last decade plus, and try and say like, oh yeah, there's just not enough money to be able to pay the walk-ons, when you probably could pay off these waterfalls and barbershops that you have in your own facilities if you really wanted to be able to make something like that work. Trev Alberts, the new A&M AD who came over from Nebraska, he had one of the most significant comments of the week, saying that college football doesn't have a revenue problem, it has an expense problem. Some pointed out the irony of that coming from the AD at the school that just signed up to pay a $76 million buyout to a coach not to work. It wasn't necessarily Trev Alberts' doing. He was the guy who signed off on like a $250 million renovation for the football stadium and then left his alma mater, and now he's making really good money at Texas A&M. Yeah, those things are all true. He is still right. We've pointed this out forever. This isn't anything new. You can just find things to spend money on if you're a college athletic department, or if you're a big time college football program. Yeah, you can just keep spending more and more money. And eventually it was going to turn into, well, can we really do anything else to make these facilities any more incredible than they already are. It's not just that all of a sudden we're going to see this new era of college football come and they're going to stop spending money on stupid stuff. That's still going to happen, right? You can set your watch to that. There's still a ton of money to be able to go around, but having as much as $21 million go to players changes how this will all be approached from that standpoint. And maybe the Title IX is going to impact the roster sizes. That's what it kind of is looking like, at least at this point on the onset. Still kind of waiting to see what all that's going to look like. Greg Sankey talked about how this could be a conference by conference deal. I'm here to say that if that is the case, the SEC is maxing out. They're not going to be the ones that are stringent on that if the way the scheduling approach has played out is any such indication, which I think it absolutely would be. Coaches would be doing whatever they could to bang the drum to get as many people as possible on that roster. And if this isn't some NCAA mandated, universally accepted rule where the core four meets together on this Zoom call and they look into each other's eyes and they say, oh, we're going to have this 85 scholarships is going to be the 85 roster players. That's going to be the max that we're all going to do. We're all going to agree on this. I don't think that's going to happen just because things like that typically don't happen in college football, but it does at least feel for the time being like the days of 125 man rosters that could be in serious jeopardy. Another thing that came out of the SEC meetings this week in Destin, maybe we're going to get injury reports in the SEC. Maybe, I don't know. I say that with a question. What a concept that would be. Injury reports are kind of a joke, but kind of not. The NFL has the inactives that are announced 90 minutes before kickoff, and it's always something that's considered significant news, even though we already have the updates throughout the week. But if you're asking yourself why now, what's the significance of this? It's definitely related to gambling. I mean, so much of it comes back to that. Gambling being legalized in more and more states, there's a want to be able to have more information out there for the public to be able to consume, especially if large amounts of money are exchanging hands. Kirby actually said that if it's for gambling, then he's for it, and that if it'll help student athletes more, he's very much on board. I can't imagine. That's the part of this that I probably don't consider enough, and I've never gone down this road, but I probably should think about what this would be like if you were, let's say, a quarterback dealing with a nagging ankle injury going into a big time game or something like that. And, as college kids do, as a lot of young adults do, DMs are open. The amount of people seeking that information, hey, you going to play on Saturday? Hey, how you feeling? Hey, rooting for you. How's everything going? The amount of people that they get that are reaching out to them is probably insane. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason that there would be momentum to be able to get injury reports out there, but it's a thing. And coaches would prefer to have less distractions for their star players. And it's like, hey, just have the team take care of this, and they kind of handle this on the back end, then maybe that would take away some of that headache. Sankey told the media that he wouldn't guarantee that this will become a thing by 2024. Yeah, again, don't hold your breath on that. Don't. The Big Ten did it last year, though. And you know what? 2 hours before kickoff, having schools submit who's going to be inactive doesn't sound that crazy. Doesn't sound like you're all of a sudden going to reinvent the wheel. You don't need any gamesmanship going on here. I think at that point, hey, it's kind of in the barn on the old game plan there. I don't know. I get it. A lot of weird things can happen to 18 to 22-year-old kids. I remember the Will Campbell thing a couple of years ago with the dehydration thing right before the game. You're like, whoa, okay, that kind of came out of nowhere. Stuff like that happens. But being able to disclose information like that, you're going to figure it out at some point, whether it's on field or not. And you're going to be able to make in-game adjustments anyway. So having that out there beforehand, it just seems like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So hopefully there will be at least some sort of momentum with that. And maybe it's not going to look exactly like the NFL, where the NFL has the practice update on Wednesday. Then on Friday, they have to submit a report saying whether a player is questionable, which is if you're limited in practice in any way. If you're not a full participant, you have to be listed as questionable. And then they have the doubtful distinction and then out. If teams don't do this or they try to game the system, Sark actually had the punishment that I think would make the most sense. I don't know if it would have the most momentum, but he's like, look, you want to game the system, find the coaches. If you want to try and duck the injury report and be vague about it, or have a situation where it's like a Bijan Robinson thing, like what happened last year, and God bless Arthur Smith. We're really going to miss him from the NFL world. Said no one ever. I realize he's still in the coordinator role, but you get what I'm saying as a head coach. The takeaway from that is, well, hey, they were required to submit an injury report, and why didn't we find out about this with a star running back? And then you face the blowback. I can't remember if there was a punishment that came down from that, but if you did what Sark was saying and find the head coaches, it would at least give you some sort of pushback if they knew they were staring at a $20,000 fine for not submitting an accurate injury report. It doesn't have to necessarily be to the extent of golf, where if you write down a wrong score or something like that, your scorecard is just nuked, and that's just considered cheating, and it's void essentially for that round. But yeah, I mean, having a little bit of transparency, I don't think that's going to necessarily kill college football. The funny thing, and the thing that I would just be waiting for, is the first coach that would just be like, yeah, screw it, I'm just going to pay the $20,000 fine. I'd rather be vague and have some sort of strategic advantage. You know that there are just some coaches out there, probably in the SEC, that'd be willing to do something like that and take on the fine. We have a week 1 to 3 TV schedule. I probably buried the lead a bit. Apologies. That news came out on Thursday afternoon. I know that's all people want to talk about, and we just freak out about the schedule, about times. And I get it from a planning standpoint. It's kind of fun to map out what a day is going to look like and all that stuff. I actually don't have a ton of takeaways from the SEC side on what that looks like. We already had found out about some of these big headliner games, talked about that a little bit ago. I do, however, and I'm going to need time to process those 12:45 Eastern time kickoffs on SEC Network, which are going to be a thing. I will be calling those games noon games. Okay. And I don't think anybody listens to this show hoping that I'm going to provide, how should I say, the information they need to know about a kickoff time. I would hope not. So do not let me fool you. But for my sanity, I will be referring to those as noon games and not 12:45 games. I can't do that. I am going to be not surprised at all when there are fans who get into the stadium and assume that it is a noon kickoff, only to realize, oh, wait, we've got how much longer until this thing actually starts? That is going to happen. That means, I'm warning you right now, I'm not going to say the 12:45 kickoff times, but I am going to give notice that Tennessee fans week 1, A&M fans week 2, Mizzou fans week 3, you have been warned. This is your warning right now. You don't get it week of from me of, oh yeah, this game actually kicks off at 12:45 p.m. Eastern time. No, that's not what we're here to do. They're noon games as far as I'm concerned. I'm not making that distinction. Just because it's an early kick doesn't mean it's a noon kick. I get it, but yeah, we're not signing up for that. We just absolutely cannot. It is weird to think about the fact that we're going to have these SEC championship games on ABC. I haven't processed that yet either. And we've talked a lot about the role of CBS and how that felt very much synonymous with the era of SEC football. We're going to talk about that with our interview that we have next week as well. But it's still weird to think about, oh yeah, I'm going to be watching ABC for that game. I think we need to just have Gary go on IG Live during the SEC championship. Give the people something to yell at, man. I mean, take one for the team. I think Gary would be a good sport about it. Okay. I don't know that he's going to be on the call for the Big Ten championship on CBS. Is that happening? God, no, I would think it's on NBC. Okay. So strike that from the record. Gary, just go on IG Live during the SEC championship, at least for a half, a quarter. I don't know. Give the people something. We have rivalry week changes. Yes. Those two things in the same sentence, not good. Never good. People do not like that. And I'll be honest, the Egg Bowl being played on Black Friday, even as someone who loves Black Friday, absolutely love it. It is the most underrated day on the college football calendar and I say that before this year where it has really gotten beefed up for 2024. The Egg Bowl belongs on Thanksgiving. It just does. And I know that it hasn't always been played on Thanksgiving. I get it. But that is what we need. I think we as an American public have appreciated that, especially in recent memory, the craziness that this has given us to be able to wean ourselves off the tryptophan. We have been able to kick our feet back, have the 16th Hawaiian roll of the day, maybe some turkeys on there, maybe it's not, whatever, don't really care, and watch the Egg Bowl. That is our right. And if we don't have that on Thanksgiving, that's a tough pill to swallow. That is a really, really tough pill to swallow. I need that craziness at night. I don't need another random NFL game. I don't. I need people fighting in the stands, fighting on the field. I need unpredictable, glorious, Magnolia State American tackle football. I need that on my Thanksgiving night. And that we're not going to get that. That's your boy's not exactly appreciating that move. Middle of the day on Black Friday. Nope. Don't like that. Clean old fashioned hate also moving to Black Friday. More okay with that. Much more okay with that. That game gets kind of overlooked in the grand scheme of rivalry week. And it gets overlooked now because of how one-sided it's become. Obviously, Georgia's a big part of that. But I kind of like that game on that Friday, and I like it for Georgia because it gives them an extra day to prep for the SEC championship. See what I did there? Yeah. Georgia fans know. I'm sure that's the upside. I'm sure that Kirby didn't have to be talked into something like that. I don't know how much of a say he had in that, come to think of it. But it does kind of feel a bit like Florida and Florida State, what they did with Black Friday at night a couple of years ago. Really fun game, actually, that turned into just kind of a great sickos committee type of game, with the way that Florida just could not complete a pass for the longest time, with walk-ons out there playing receiver out beside Ricky Pearsall and whatnot. It was a disaster that somehow Florida was in down the stretch against a really good Florida State team. So maybe Black Friday is going to give us a game like that, old-fashioned hate. Who knows? But yeah, this kind of all goes back to what I've talked to before. The desire that ESPN and ABC has is to try and give us a full day and as many of these windows as possible where we feel like it's appointment viewing. It's no longer, hey, we got to kind of tiptoe around this, 3:30 CBS deal. No, they're just going to try and give us the best lineup of games. And sometimes there's going to be a fan base that's like, man, we're in that noon slot, really? I felt like this game was so much better than that. What are we doing here? But I think it'll still benefit a lot of us who like to be able to just watch an entire day of college football and don't want necessarily to have all of these headliner games at the same specific time. They're going to be really calculated in kind of how they approach that without necessarily having to worry about that 3:30 window. Another big rivalry game that is going through a little bit of a change here in many ways. The Red River rivalry changing from a morning kick to now a 3:30 Eastern time, 2:30 local time kick. Brett Murphy was all over that initial scoop. First time since 2017 that game will not start at 11 a.m. local time. I kind of like when College game day would go into the stadium an hour beforehand, and then you can kind of transition into the scene. Kind of sets the stage for it. Say what you will about Michigan, Ohio State playing at noon. But the fact that you kind of get this like in stadium feel at the end of it is really cool. I remember they did that a couple years ago with the TCU Kansas game. And even for a game at Kansas, you're kind of like, all right, place is buzzing. Let's go. There's something to be said for that. But yeah, I think that having this game in that window now at 3:30, it just speaks to the desire to want to have a full loaded day of college football. And I guess I'm okay with it. I realize that they're kind of going back to what they did throughout most of the 20th century with this matchup. But the first year of the Texas and Oklahoma game in the SEC will be 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 local. Speaking of those teams, how about Chris Del Conte coming in hot? Did you see this? The Texas athletic director, he went on Feinbaum, and let's just say he made his presence very felt. Here's the quote that he had about the Red River rivalry. He said, "It's ridiculous. It's the greatest thing ever. You may talk about the cocktail party in the Iron Bowl. It is nothing like this game at the State Fair because you've got 300,000 people there outside. The Iron Bowl is awesome. Don't get me wrong. Same with the cocktail party, but this game is nuts too. He added that he wasn't throwing shade at those SEC rivalry games, just saying that it was, quote, an unbelievable environment. I don't doubt that, and I've never been. Maybe I'm going to be able to find a way to go to that one this year. I would love to. I will say, if your argument for why a game is uniquely nuts and awesome is because of the State Fair outside of the stadium, I'll push back on that a little bit. It should be probably more about what goes on in the stadium, but I get what he's saying and why that makes it unique. Just the surrounding buzz, all the different people that you have that are within walking distance of the stadium. Those games are all great. Okay, they're all great. Paul and others will talk about how great those games are. Okay, we will do so on this podcast because why wouldn't we? I do think Del Conte was just trying to get Paul to talk about how great that game was and kind of using the cocktail party, using the Iron Bowl to say that those games are great. Our game is also great, and this is what makes it unique. Probably not the way it came off. Probably not. But what are you going to do? You're trying to stir the pot a little bit. They're not here necessarily to make friends. I'm okay with all that. Scott Strickland wants us to stop talking about Florida's schedule. Jesse Simonson had the quote from the Florida AD. He said, quote, "This season is not about our schedule. It's about the Gators. And if the Gators are being the Gators, we're going to be all right." There's actually a lot to unpack with that quote. I know that might come off as a bit of a surprise, but there is a lot to what he said. Let's start with the first sentence about this season not being about the schedule. Scott Strickland doesn't think that we should talk about the schedule and how Florida has what some are saying is the most difficult schedule in college football history. Why do you think Scott Strickland doesn't want that brought up? Why do you think he doesn't want that dominating an 8-month offseason? Because he had a pretty significant role in putting that schedule together. He addressed that with Jesse as well. This schedule was made because of the 12-team playoff. Said it at the time, I'm still saying it. I know there are people that are pushing back saying, are we going to not see any more headliner games with the 12-team playoff? We're not going to see any more of these headliner games in non-conference play. If that's your approach, go look at the non-conference schedules that a lot of these SEC teams have, because there are some that are absolutely loaded, and maybe they'll try and get out of them, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't get why that's really gaining a ton of traction right now. But this schedule at the time had UCF as an AAC school. It wasn't in the Big 12 yet. And Strickland said to Jesse, he's like, we would have handled that differently had we known that was going to play out. Okay, so the fact that Florida ended up with 11 Power 5 teams wasn't the intent. It wasn't. He was still the guy that was going out on social media saying, hey, who wants to schedule a matchup? And he was kind of, I hate to use this example because Florida fans, you're going to get mad at me for saying this. There are some Michael Scott, Willy Wonka, and the Chocolate Factory vibes to this. The Golden Ticket episode, you know what I'm talking about. There was a little bit of that with Scott Strickland when he was putting these matchups together. And I went back this earlier in the offseason. I looked at some of the tweets that he had about it, and he was on board with it. And I was on board with it too because of Florida's reluctance to leave the Sunshine State for a true road non-conference game. And I was kind of applauding him. I was like, yeah, this is good. This is good for the sport. I would love more athletic directors to get behind this. But now he's kind of like, hey, let's not talk about the difficulty of the schedule. He's not patting himself on the back for this because he knows, yeah, it's really, really difficult. It's still, though, I don't know that you can point out, yeah, we had a schedule like this in 2019. 2019, Florida faced both Miami and Florida State. Okay, they're doing that again this year, and then also this year you throw in the UCF game. That's why we're talking about it so much, and other reasons as well. The problem is that when you have 3 consecutive losing seasons, your potential hurdles are magnified. That's the way this works. Florida didn't have potential hurdles in 2019. Okay, it had a team that was coming off of a New Year's Six Bowl victory with Dan Mullen. It was a preseason number 8 team. That's the highest preseason ranking Florida had in the post-Urban Meyer era. There was different context surrounding that team. And also, Florida State and Miami were down. It's very different than what we're talking about coming into this year. And you can not believe in Miami, but still, the regular season over-under is 9.5 wins. Expectations are high. And in a sport with a long offseason like this, yes, that is going to be magnified. Context is key with stuff like this. In context of why Strickland's $52 million coach is on every hot seat list that he probably opens up and sees this offseason, that's probably taking into account the schedule and how difficult it is. If you're not mentioning the schedule in a conversation about Billy Napier's future, you're kind of missing the boat. I don't really know why you wouldn't bring up something like that. Also, other part of what he said, that original quote, if the Gators are being the Gators, we'll be all right. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean anything. Because, and I know Florida fans, you're going to push back on me and you're saying, well, if Florida can live up to the Florida standard, it can handle the schedule. That's what he's trying to say. I get it. If being the Gators is being champions, doesn't, I mean, look, Florida did that 3 times in my lifetime. But are you saying that being the best team in America will allow Florida to navigate the schedule? Or is being Gators, Strickland put it, getting to New Year's Six Bowls? Because to Florida's credit, it is one of 13 teams in college football who won multiple New Year's Six Bowls during the 14 playoff era. Florida deserves credit for that. But I'm just curious when Strickland believes was the last time that, quote, the Gators were the Gators. Because 3 consecutive losing seasons and 4 of the last 7 seasons being losing seasons, I don't really know that you get to say that there's a certain standard that as long as Florida lives up to it, it'll be fine. The standard's all over the place, man. It just kind of is. Maybe it's not so much the standard, but the end result has been all over the place. So I don't really know that Florida, a program that has had a really low floor for a team that's actually had a lot of 21st century success, I don't know that Florida gets to come out and say something like that, despite all the good things that they have done. It's just kind of a weird, it's just a weird sentence. If the Gators are the Gators, it's like, well, 3 consecutive losing seasons. It's very, very loud. I will agree with Scott Strickland, though. If Florida plays like it did in 2008, it will navigate this schedule. Okay? I'm on board for that. Just thought it was a head-scratching quote. All right. Let's kick it to our interview with Tom Zbikowski. This was really surreal for me because he was larger than life growing up in our area, suburbs of Chicago. I mean, this is the guy that if you went to a high school basketball game and he was, in the front row as a fan, he'd be like signing autographs with people. Like he was that big of a deal. It was John Shire in basketball at Glenbrook North and then Tom Zbikowski at our high school, Buffalo Grove. So great to be able to chat with him. Got some language in there. So heads up for the kids in the car. Maybe save this for later, come back to it. But fun interview with a guy that I've known about for a very, very long time. So here's Tom. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is former Notre Dame legend and current Brown University safeties coach, Tom Zbikowski. But most importantly, Tom, you are a fellow proud graduate of Buffalo Grove High School. True story. When someone asks me where I'm from and I say Buffalo Grove and I see a little bit of that look on their face, but if I know they're a sports fan, I tell them that's where Tom Zbikowski went to high school. So thank you for literally putting Buffalo Grove on the map.
Bisons, I appreciate it.
Man, it's
If it wasn't for my brother, I wanted to go to Mount Carmel. If we're being honest,
that would have been devastating for a lot of people.
I know. My brother was baseball. My brother was football. My brother was a lot more friends and enjoying him. Not enjoying himself as a partier, but just enjoying life, not trying to be. I was on that different type of mindset where can I go compete against the best? Where can I be on the best? Let's do this. My mother gave me the best piece of advice I've probably gotten from her was go change the culture. You can go be a part of something that's already been established, or you can go ahead and change the culture that's around you. And I took heed of that advice, and really, that's kind of happy that I did what I did at Buffalo Grove, and then, really, if you look at my track record, continue to do that for the places that I've been. So appreciate my mom, appreciate my brother for paving the way for me for for Buffalo Grove, because I definitely would not have changed it for anything to see the amount of excitement that 2001 and 2002 brought to the school and, the local community.
It was definitely a big part of our childhood growing up for sure. And I got a ton I want to get to with you. Let's start with what you're currently doing, trying to change the culture at Brown. You started your coaching career a couple years ago at Western Michigan in 2022, more of a behind the scenes type thing, and now you're getting into your second season at Brown, coaching safeties there. You played, you boxed professionally, you were a firefighter. Why coaching?
Um, I left the game on terms that, I got unfinished business to do in this profession and in this sport. Um, I was told by the majority of my coaches that I played for that coaching is something I should look into. Um, I knew I was going to get into it. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying it right now. Um, just you hear a lot of stories. It's a tough profession. There ain't no stability. There for sure ain't no stability. Um, but if you're good at it and work hard at it, you should move up the ranks, relatively quickly. I enjoy the impact on the kids, the impact on the young men that are, um, especially at Brown. I mean, you're talking about high achieving, high character individuals that um, the NFL would probably be a worse option for what they have going in their lives. So to be around that type of kid, that type of intelligence, and um, it's enjoyable. It makes it enjoyable when you can have adult conversations with kids when they're that mature um, and they're that motivated in life. It makes it worth it.
You were just on the road recruiting. You remember what it was like to be a big time recruit. We were talking before we came on. It's unique what you have to manage in terms of the summer. Like what it looks like a summer workflow, because unlike at FBS programs where they're there and they're putting in work and they got different workout plans. You got kids that are like doing internships on Wall
Yeah,
Street and stuff
right.
like that. How unique is that recruiting experience at Brown compared to the type of experience you had?
It's um, it's definitely different because you gotta have it starts with a GPA, a certain GPA. If you're not in that 3.5 ballpark, there's no point in really even looking at your film. It's a waste of time at that point because I know how um, we get Brown gets 50 to 55,000 applications a year for 1,700 spots. You know what I mean? So they're serious about who they let in here. And our head coach, James Perry, was a Brown alumni, won an Ivy League championship here, loves the school. He has that enthusiasm that's contagious for the pride he has for the school. And that's for good reason because um, we're ranked in the top 10 for, how much a college kid enjoys his or her experience. Um, and we have like a 96% graduation rate. So as tough as it is to get in here, you'll be given the resources to graduate. And they enjoy going here because we have an open curriculum here, so none of the kids got to take prerequisites. So it is really you want a double major, you can start off. You can be as narrow as you want in your education as soon as you get here. I know I want to be business, econ, and Spanish, or next 4 years, that's all you got to be taking, and everything outside of that is pass fail. So it's like you're actually given the opportunity to um, develop your own education, your own plan for how you're going to be educated. Unlike you go to Notre Dame, you're going to have to take theology classes, you're going to have to take philosophy classes, you're going to take classes that end up having you finishing with a 1.75 your first semester in college, and then just just absolutely miserable because now you feel stupid, you feel dumb. Your ego takes a hit that it shouldn't really take because you're not dumb, you're just not enjoying the courses you you're taking at the moment. So you spend the next 4 years getting 3.0s and stuff, but still only finish with like a 2.7 GPA because of that first semester. It's like, what's, why? Just because you've always done that, I don't get what that has to do. So, um, that selling point really for kids that are smart, that have high grades, high academic standards. Um, it's pretty enticing for them to know that they'll be able to build their own program.
Yeah, I remember having a 2.8 my first semester in Indiana.
Yeah,
Like,
right. So,
it was awful. It was
175.
brutal.
I had no D's, I had no F's, but I literally had C minuses across the board, just barely scrape by in every class. Like, I don't want to be reading Plato right now. Like, I get, you know what I mean? I'm not really that interested in rehashing Homer's Odyssey.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. Let's go back to your recruitment because you were a two-way star who also played special teams. Plus, you're one of the top amateur boxers, in the country. Urban Meyer was the first person to recruit you back when he was at Bowling Green, and then Northwestern was the first big-time offer that you got. Nebraska told you that you could have been the next Eric Crouch, and Tommy Frazier, Eric, like Scott Frost, all those different mobile quarterbacks, because obviously that's what you were a star in at Buffalo
Yeah.
Grove. Navy tells you can do the boxing thing as well. Like you're this guy that you wore number 9 for Jim McMahon, which by the way I'm repping
Right.
some
I
Jim
know. I
McMahon.
was gonna mention. Yeah, I love it.
Little hat tip.
I love it.
What was that process like for you when you had all these different options and people telling you could do all these different things?
Um, it was enjoyable at first. Then it becomes a nuisance, and then it becomes a really tough decision because um, I did have aspirations of making it to the NFL. I never thought I'd actually play in the NFL, but I did want to at least see what it was like, see a training camp or something, just see, be around, uh, put myself in position to be around the best players and then see what would happen after that. So, um, I always loved punt returning, so I know I wanted to give myself a chance to punt return, which playing quarterback would not have done that. I really wanted to hit people, you know, and then, but as soon as I went and played, my first year was really redshirting was really, really tough because I really enjoyed playing quarterback. I loved having the ball in my hands every play, and um, if you look at the progression of my quarterback play, I ran a lot my senior year because then I was 185 pounds. I was a 10.5 100-meter guy, so it wasn't too hard to reverse out and hit either corner. And then we're optioning the corner, and that guy has no chance of tackling me. So this is. But if you saw my sophomore tape, you saw my junior tape, I was a highly effective passer. I was a better passer than Eric Crouch. I had better touch. I took my quarterback play seriously. I would go to Maine South every Sunday to work with this guy, Charlie Bliss, who was a Chicago fireman, and would put on weekend camps for free, never charged nobody. It was kind of more invite only, but this was every Sunday in the winter was quarterback camp. Every summer I'd go to Bishop Delegan, which was at Wheaton College, would be like a 2 or 3 day, throw it 1,000 times a day. Then I would go to the Manning's Passing Academy in Louisiana in July. My father and I once went to Michigan to work with a guy quarterback stuff that we didn't bring a football. There was no football involved. We really drove there and only did drops, under center drops for an hour. This was after my sophomore year, going into my junior. Scratch that, after my freshman year, going into my sophomore year, because I was going to be the varsity quarterback as a sophomore. And really, the boxing training, more than anything, I think, more than any other position, helps with quarterback play. A lot of my footwork, a lot of making people miss, boxing is what made me so hard to bring down in the backfield was so hard to sack, get a sack on me because of all the training that I had done up to that point. So it was tough, man. It really was tough to make that final decision. Most people don't take me seriously when I tell them I put Nebraska, Iowa, and Notre Dame in a hat and picked out of a hat, just left it up to fate. That's where I was with my decision, because I love Tommy Frazier. I love Nebraska football. It was late, it was 2001, so if you paid attention at all in the 90s of what Nebraska was, it would be hard not to go there. And then being from where we're from, to turn down an offer to play at Notre Dame was like sacrilegious. Like, it's just not a thing. And to turn down the opportunity to play on, every single weekend, a nationally televised game, if you got a product that you're trying to put out there, it's tough to turn that down when you're going to be watched every single week.
Wait a minute. So I didn't know this. You literally picked out of a hat between Nebraska,
Yeah.
Iowa, and Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You have this start at Notre Dame where you burst onto the scene in 2005. And it's unfortunate that on a day when you make arguably the best play that Notre Dame has had in the 21st century, that punt return that you have against USC, everybody knows what happens later that day with the Bush push. And I'll never forget being at the house of one of my buddies whose family knew your family. And we're watching, we're celebrating just like you did on the back end in the end zone when Matt Leinart has that fumble. And that, of course, sets up the Bush push that everybody knows. It's an iconic college football play. Looking back on that day 20 years later, what do you remember most about that?
The build-up beforehand, it was palpable. Like, you could feel, fans were already coming in for a Saturday game. Traffic was heavy by Wednesday. Like, it was, all right, all games are big at Notre Dame, but this is different. This is one that's going to live for the ages. So be prepared, get ready. You like those type of challenges, especially a lot of the people in my class all played in that U.S. Army All-American game. I think there was like 7 or 8 of us. So we played Reggie Bush. We knew what Reggie and Lendale. Lendale and Reggie were the 2 running backs for the West team. We were on the East team, right? So we knew very well how good Reggie Bush was. I know a lot of times as veterans in the NFL or older guys in college, when you hear about a freshman or a rookie coming up, it's like, we've heard this before. It's not, there's better players, trust us. And then you see Reggie Bush in action, you're like, oh, well, maybe there's not. And we all collectively, we wanted to beat them. We wanted to, we knew we were going to give our best performance. They had a lot of talent, and things went there. They just had things rolling. They had the right momentum because they had a lot of games like that. It wasn't like all their games were blowouts. They had a lot of games where they had to come together and, win late.
I've always
a wild experience just because the crowd noise was different. Like, there was no replay boards there at the time. There was no live music. It really was whether you can entertain the crowd or not. So, it was special to hear that type of noise, that type of raucous, that type of volume come from what notoriously is a quieter stadium.
I've always wondered, what would have happened if the Bush push if it had just been, the Leinart fumble and you guys take over, and Notre Dame's trajectory is obviously a lot different because you guys probably would have had a really good chance to play for a national title against Texas. And the game of the century, USC Texas, probably doesn't happen. What do you think would have happened if you guys had gotten that opportunity to face Vince Young in Texas?
Probably would have got our ass kicked. Ohio State kicked their ass. Yes, Ohio State put up 700 yards of offense against us. So I mean, we probably would get our ass kicked.
That's a fair answer, man. That's a fair answer.
Right. We
That's
didn't
the
beat,
God
they
honest truth.
were the number 5. There's no way we're going to beat the number 1 team if we can't beat the number 4 or 5 team. So, I mean, it's just how it is.
Okay, but after that '05 season, I remember you still like you were at that point a household name in the sport, and I remember you came back to Buffalo Grove to I think you were seeing Rich Roberts, maybe you see Coach Stout or North or one of those guys or
Right.
something like that. And you came back with Samardzija one time, and it was the talk
Yeah.
of the school. Like the school, everybody was just buzzing, like trying to sneak a peek in the locker room, that area, and stuff like that. Like, oh, maybe they're they're going to stick around or something. Give me your best Samardzija story that's maybe appropriate for a PG-13 audience.
Oh man. Ain't none of them gonna be PG-13. We just, we always. Probably when we got in a fight our freshman year in an NCAA play. Now that NCAA is coming out, he had the council upstairs. We were in the same dorm, different. Freshman year, you're brought into the mix at Notre Dame, so you're not gonna have a football roommate. So like me, I was excited because I'm like, all right, this is Notre Dame. I'll get a kid that can afford a TV because I certainly can't afford a TV. I'll get somebody that will probably be clean and organized and a high achiever, and then I get roomed with a hockey player that like 2 years later already has like 6 DUIs on campus. Right, our centerpiece of the room was a CCM bag. Just dirt, just. He never finished a protein bar, so just like there was a rodent infestation halfway through the year, so I would get out of there every chance I got. Like, I'll sleep here, but I'm not. There ain't gonna be much time spent here. So we went up. It's a heated NCAA game, PlayStation, like most of them are. I play with Miami, the U. I forgot who he would play with, so I would either throw it up to Shockey or Kellen Winslow on a deep crosser route, like send everyone deep and hit a deep tight end crosser route. This was my offense. I would maybe run like 3 plays. This would be my third down. This would be my 2-minute. This was the majority of my offense was all verts with the tight end going across. So I hit him late on like a last second touchdown. I'm freaking out. We look at each other. I have no other reaction than to slap him across the face for whatever reason. So I slap him across the face, and then I know I've done wrong, so I'm not fighting back. And then he mounts me. We're wrestling. His roommate comes in at that point. We're mid, fucking like 2 teenage brothers in a dorm room, straight up. Shirts being ripped off, hockey, all everything but punches happening because he's a gifted. He wrestled back in the day, so it ain't like he doesn't have good grappling. Because the other one in the mix was Trevor Laws, who was for the most part the number 1 ranked heavyweight wrestler in the country. So like at random parties, you would see everyone else, and then you'd see us 3 taking bouts of who was grappling, who was going live goes in the grass.
I can think of things that I'd rather do than get into a wrestling match with Tom Zbikowski.
Right, it's just
hard pass.
It was all the builds because one's a heavyweight, super athletic, one's super tall and long, and then there's me. So we all had our strengths. Most of them were stalemates. Like there really was passionate live goes that were all in good fun.
That's incredible. I hate to keep harping on the negative moments of your career, but the '06 Sugar Bowl with Jamarcus Russell, how blown away were you by him? Because I remember like people knew about Jamarcus Russell at the time, but that felt like such a coming out party for him, and ultimately played a big part in him becoming the number 1 overall pick.
I try to block that memory out of my game. I enjoy that game out of my memory.
Fair.
And Bourbon Street had a lot to do with that too. So I don't there wasn't much. There's not much effort I have to do to not remember that game because I don't really remember much of that trip to begin with.
Okay, that's
But
fair.
boy, is that food! Boy, the hurricanes and is the food good down there.
Second to none.
But they came ready to play. You know, the year before we were um, no going out. We were a little too tight for the Fiesta Bowl, and then we were way too loose for the Sugar Bowl. It just is, you know, it's just how it was.
You
We
were just
learned,
trying.
you know, we tried to learn from the Fiesta Bowl results because we know that they were out early in the week. They enjoyed their trip. We were on lockdown. It was too militant for, you know, it didn't need to be like that. And it probably needed to be a little tighter for Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Like it needed to be a little bit. I think we were just a young coach that was trying to figure out what to do in bowl season, which is why when you look at all the turnover, the people that do well in bowl games are people that have had some stability in the program because they've learned from a mistake or they know, all right, do we do 2 days during this time? Do we do 1-a-days? Do we give them a week off? What's the recipe for having the best bowl game? It's not easy, you know, because you're not playing. You're off for a month. It's not like you're playing. You don't have any games for a month and then you're playing again. Do you go super basic? Do you give them throw everything that they haven't seen? What's the recipe for winning a bowl game? So I can't really blame, Charlie for that was a team. You know, that was a leadership failure, not a coach's failure. Because as a leader of that team, I shouldn't have been the one that's on Bourbon Street till the last second before getting a po' boy at 1:55 as bed checks at 2:00 or whatever.
To be fair, Jim McMahon was legendarily out and about before the Super Bowl '85. You're just trying to embrace your inner Jim McMahon.
I grew up with that too. And here's the thing too. You hear those stories. Those guys were having a few beers. I don't think they were doing the stupid shit. They were out and about socializing, having a good time. Having a good time. Where you know how college goes. It's competition for who can consume the most, not who can have the best time.
Can we talk boxing?
Yeah, I love it.
How much did it frustrate you that Ty Willingham didn't let you try and box in the Olympics in 04?
I should have probably presented it to him a little bit better that I wanted to do it because when I brought it up, he really didn't know that I wanted to fight in the Olympics. And at that point, I think I was just getting over like the homesickness of leaving for college and all right, we're not playing quarterback anymore like that. I really wanted to play a lot right after the freshman season. So really that whole off season, I wouldn't have been a 4-year starter if I would have been fighting in the Olympics. And just like my pro debut in Madison Square Garden kind of took me away from football for a little bit, I'm assuming that fighting in the Olympics would have done the same, just because boxing was my first love, and every time I do it, I remember how much I love it. So it's always been a tough balancing act. I wish I would have just given up on boxing and just used it as a training tool and not really kept the competitive side of it. It would have helped my football career in the long run.
It's interesting to hear you say that. And by the way, definitely remember pooling together $50 to watch that fight, and then you knock that guy out in 49 seconds after he comes out with the Ohio State jersey. Just all-time moment. That was just, I have buddies to this day that are still like, yeah, can we get our money back for that? Because that was 1 minute. The build-up was great though.
Like we say in that business, we don't get paid hourly, so let's get it done with.
That you
get
definitely
paid the
did.
same. Get paid the same whether it's 10 seconds or whether it's 45 minutes. So might as well make it as quick as possible.
Exactly. Could you have done like if that had been an option for you though? Like an NIL was a thing, could you have done something a little bit Jake Paulish with the Notre Dame platform that you had at the time, and like kind of gone up the ranks and like got scheduled some big time fights at the time? If it was just, hey, this is what we're gonna do this in May or something like that, or June, could you have done something like that if there had been the financial incentive instead of you can't really do this while you're juggling football because it just from a you can't really monetize it in the way that obviously you could now.
Right. Um, yeah, I'm assuming my bank account would look a whole lot different if NIL was how it is now. Especially even at Notre Dame, the amount of jerseys and the stuff that was going on that was sold of mine, I'm assuming would be a lot different. But I try not to think about that because it's just, man, it ain't ever gonna go on my bank account. So what's the point of trying to think of what could have been or what should have been? What I know is that it was a great experience for me and I enjoyed it. So I mean, it's keeps you hungry. I don't know how good it is for the young athletes now, anyways, to be getting paid. I know there's the Chef Boyardee's at nighttime. Like you can't be making that type of money, and that's what we're living on because we're just, man, we ain't got, our parents were expecting you to be able to foot the bill, not have them, that's kind of what is promised to you. But, 'cause I don't know how much, it made you hungry to make it to the NFL. Made you really hungry to make it to the NFL. I don't know how hungry these guys are, not necessarily to make it to the NFL, but be great. Everyone wants to make it to the NFL. They're going to make it to the NFL and then be done after about 6 months. Just how it is. And those ones that are hungry are the ones that make it. Because the talent's all going to be the same. You're not going to be more talented than anyone there.
If it's you have interesting perspective now looking back on all the different things that you've done. You talk about how you would have just not boxed these as a training tool. If I could have given you a crystal ball 17, even more than that, let's go back to like circa 2002 or something like that, back when you were 17 years old and all these different places are telling you can do all these different things and what you know now. What would you have maybe done differently outside of just kind of treating boxing as more of a training tool?
Right. So that's an inch. Either played quarterback and finished up my college career and then gone right into professional boxing, or use it as a training tool and put all my focus into football and school, more into football and school than just football and boxing. And by school, I mean the networking and really having a plan for, I never really had much thought of after boxing or after football, like to make it to where I made it. You got to be fully engaged in what that world is.
Tom, this has been great. Really appreciate you doing this. I want to get you out of here with 5 rapid fire questions, just 5 questions. First thing that comes to mind. Does that work for you?
Perfect.
All right. First one is an obvious one. What's your go-to Portillo's order when you're back in the Chicago area?
Oh man, it depends on whether I want a Maxwell Polish, or a big beef dipped, sweet and hot, with sometimes mozzarella. Cheese fries, I always get the large cheese fry.
That's a good
I like
order.
their tamales. I get a bundle of tamales sometimes. I gotta get their tamales.
I didn't even know they did that.
Yeah,
Portillo's does tamales?
Yeah.
Wow. Jeez. Okay.
I like the micro. They're the steamed ones that are coming. The cheap. They're not like the real tamales, but I love them. Tasty.
Portillo's can do no wrong. That's what I always say.
No, and they do it in little bunches, so they give you like 4 little ones, not two big ones.
All right, I'm gonna have to try that. One word to
and a chocolate cake. I had chocolate cake. My bad, a slice of chocolate cake.
That's a given. I assume it's chocolate shake or a cake shake, one of the two, right, or both. Yeah, that's
I didn't really like the cake shake. I don't know what it is. I don't really like the cake shake.
It's a lot. It's much.
Right, it's too.
Yeah, it's intense, definitely. Okay, one word to describe your thoughts on targeting.
Bogus.
There it is. That's all I needed.
Lame.
That's several words. That's okay.
Soft. Weak.
Yeah, I'm sure you got some
Bring
more
back
colorful.
Wilbur Marshall hits.
There you go. Gosh, those are iconic. Speaking of the '85 Bears,
He's my favorite linebacker.
yeah, absolute best, man. And literally everything would be targeting now. Looking back on all of those,
Dude, he almost killed the one dude. The quarterback from the Lions.
True. Yeah, still the all-time NFL films decleater is that clip.
It's got to be.
Yeah,
he hits so hard.
Okay, speaking of decleaters, guys would be called for targeting every 2 seconds. True or false? You spent time with him at the Ravens. True or false? Ed Reed would deliver the "I'm hurt, dog" speech before every Ravens playoff game.
Yeah, false.
No, that's a bummer.
Someone else would probably say it. Someone else on the team, but no, when he spoke up, man, you knew something needed to be done. He left it like that. He was just led by example, and if he needed to say something, you needed to get your shit right.
Yeah, always came off that way. Okay, yeah, what was your favorite thing to do on a football field? Because I feel like we've been trending. It's got to be something quarterback related, I would assume, right?
Actually, one of the favorite things I got into was the front line at kickoff return because it's so damn hard. I got so good at it that unless you're in the know, you don't understand that like you're going out for opening kickoff as a hooligan or a bully or whatever it is. That I like going to the other teams. I like being that frontline guy that had to go to the other team's sideline and to completely embarrass whoever it was that they were sending down on kickoff. That became, because I was so bad at it in college, like I wanted no piece of it in college. But punt return and like a pick six, an interception, pick six, punt return for a touchdown, all are they're game-changing plays. Like they really change the outcome of a play. A quarterback throwing a touchdown pass it happens. But
okay. Last all good answers and all things that you definitely did plenty of times in your career. Last one for you. Who do you dislike more, USC or Prospect High?
Prospect.
That's the answer.
Yeah. I had a lot of respect for USC. Like they were really were the best of them. Like they were more talented than us. Like Prospect wasn't more talented than us. They just were better coached than us. But they weren't better talented than us.
I know that 6 people listening to this might understand that reference, but for those that want to go down the rabbit hole of Buffalo Grove, Prospect High School, we don't need to go into that how that played out and everything. But yeah, just know that.
Well, it's like what are the chances of them that they have state championship caliber teams the same time that Buffalo Grove has, and then don't have? I guess they've been pretty good though since then, but nothing like what it was. And they were doing it with like 40 guys. Like, Patrica was a hell of a coach. I don't think people understand how good of a coach he was. He had a great run at Palatine, a lot of talent at Palatine, and then had that defense keyed up to what we were doing. I mean, first time we played them, they were calling my huddle plays at the line of scrimmage. Like, they weren't right.
That doesn't seem legal.
No, they weren't calling like, power, right? They were really calling the huddle plays that they were calling in the huddle.
Okay, so that just tells me Prospect was cheating, and I'm just going to go with that for the rest of my existence.
When you run the same offense for 15 years, like people are going to know what those offensive plays are.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Good point. Okay. Really appreciate this, man. Like I said, this has been an absolute treat. Best of luck with everything you got going at Brown, man.
Appreciate you.
All right, I've got some thoughts about USC not wanting to play LSU. Our Matt Hayes reported that. Yeah, USC apparently tried to get out of the Sunday night matchup against LSU in Vegas, one of the big premier matchups, really of all non-conference play, not just opening weekend. And according to multiple sources that Matt discussed this with, Lincoln Riley didn't want this game. Didn't want it. For anyone that thinks Matt might have a axe to grind with Lincoln Riley or USC, that is not the case. It is quite the opposite. I was texting with Matt about this, and he has a pretty good relationship with Lincoln. Don't know how this is going to impact it. I wouldn't say it's going to help things, but yeah, those two are not necessarily on bad terms or anything like that. So you can kind of move that from your thought process if you were going there. I don't know that Matt's going to be going to USC and getting the Josh Pate red carpet rollout, but yeah, this is significant and relevant on a few different levels. People try and back out of matchups all the time for a variety of reasons. Okay. This is not new or anything like that. It's not just inferior team doesn't want to play better team. They must be scared. Bama backed out of a home and home against Michigan State. That was set for 2016, 2017. It happened in 2013, a year before the 14 playoff, because Bama realized, hey, we can make money off of these non-conference neutral site games and not necessarily have that same risk. Or hey, what if it breaks wrong on the schedule this way? We might not have, these years where we have two losses to be able to give. And you could say like, oh, that's just weak. But also at the same time, they kind of figured out the loophole of the schedule and they were rewarded throughout the entire 14 playoff era. And it's just what they did in the 2010s. And that was done with the playoff in mind. And you can argue, all right, Bama looks like the team that's afraid to travel north. But at the time when Bama has won 3 out of the 4 national titles, saying Bama don't play nobody, Paul, kind of falls on deaf ears. Maybe it makes some people at Michigan State mad that he didn't want to come back for a reunion, but nonetheless, I think Bama still ends up getting the last laugh with that one. Michigan backed out of that series with Arkansas that was set for 2018, 2019. Michigan did so because it wanted to get Notre Dame back on the books, and that was the wiggle room that Notre Dame had in the schedule to be able to make that work. Happened pretty late, which Arkansas was not happy about. If you remember at the time, there was Chuck Long who came out. I think Bielema had quotes as well that was just expressing the frustration that Arkansas had and how they're not going to be able to get another Power 5 team on the schedule. And then sure enough, they weren't able to do that. They didn't end up facing a Power 5 team in non-conference play 2018, 2019, which probably ended up being best for Arkansas because Chad Morris went 0-16 against Power 5 competition and he went 2-4 against Group of 5 competition. So maybe for the best that Arkansas didn't end up getting to play that home and home with Michigan and that it was Michigan who backed out of it. But context is everything. Okay. Context is everything when it comes to scheduling around these games, or at least having second thoughts about these games. Context doesn't favor USC here. It doesn't. Matt reported that even when USC brought in the new AD, they were trying to find other opponents for LSU to be able to play in Vegas, saying, hey, take our spot. You love playing blah, blah, blah. And USC is not necessarily worried about who they're going to be able to play because they're like, well, we'll play anybody. We'll play an FCS team. We'll play a Group of 5 team, whatever. We'll find whatever we can do to be able to get out of this game if it means not necessarily having to open this way. Backing out of a neutral site game, a little bit different than backing out of a home and home. I think Michigan State, if I recall, was worried that Bama was going to play in that first game in 2016 in Tuscaloosa and then back out of the 2017 game that was set for East Lansing, and then they'd be stuck without anyone to play. And there's always this kind of weird fear that it's going to work out like that if the team on the other end of the contract with the home and home, the team that isn't necessarily trying to back out, if they reject, there's always going to be this, oh man, we could just get kind of screwed here and get paid a few $1,000,000 and told to just be happy with it and be on our way. But because athletic directors are so obsessed with scheduling matchups years and years and years in advance, sometimes decades in advance, you do kind of have to combat that. With USC, though, Hayes reported that Fox wasn't crazy about USC's first Big Ten game being on ESPN ABC. I don't know. Take that for what it is. I don't know how much USC's like, oh gosh, we're going to be in bad standing with them if we don't do this right. And they're going to be, like they're not necessarily worried about that. There's a reason why the Big Ten pushed for USC to be able to be a part of this conference in large part because of that market in LA. But yeah, what came from this of Riley trying to go through all these different little avenues to get out of this matchup isn't the best look. Riley and Kelly even share an agent, Trace Armstrong, and Riley tried to get him to be peacemaker, and Brian Kelly just wouldn't budge. No, we're not. Sorry, you guys are locked in. The Big Ten schedule for USC is brutally tough this year, which is why the over/under is sitting there at 7.5 wins. Okay, but this actually predates the schedule release. Maybe there was some anticipation with that. Maybe it didn't really sit well with Lincoln Riley that they've got 11 Power 5 games this year. Core 4, that's what we're calling it, plus all that travel. They're not in position to back out of the Notre Dame game just yet. I don't know why. They're still holding on to that. Maybe they shouldn't. Maybe that's not a very purist thing to say of me, especially after what we were saying earlier about that matchup. But LSU was the only game that they could back out of just to make that schedule a little bit lighter. Can't back out of any of these conference games. Doesn't really make sense to back out of the Utah State game. That's the easy one. You want more games like Utah State on the schedule. But some might be wondering, well, why schedule it in the first place? Before Lincoln Riley was at USC, and it was before USC was in the Big Ten. And I think if we're being honest, a ton of coaches would have tried doing what Lincoln Riley did. Maybe they would have kept it under wraps better than Lincoln Riley was able to do, but it released, and that's just life. I also think that when you're the coach that left Oklahoma instead of sticking around to join the SEC, a move that you knew was going to be happening because you left after that agreement was already made, that's going to hang over you. It just is. And it probably doesn't send the best message to the locker room, and it sort of debunks any belief you might puff your chest out and say about, oh, we'll play anybody anywhere. We don't care. I disagree. Very much disagree. Riley is not he is not Nick Saban. We know that. And he's not Michigan pivoting to add an even tougher game to its schedule. He's the guy that many have said, at least many Oklahoma fans will tell you, that he was boosted by the program that Bob Stoops built. And he was boosted by the time that he coached in the Big 12. Didn't necessarily have a whole lot of defense that were slowing down the big, bad Oklahoma offense run by Lincoln Riley. Just didn't. I don't know that he'll shake that whole stigma anytime soon. It's this little lingering cloud that just kind of hovers over him everywhere he goes. But as we outlined with chaos scenarios, it would be very chaotic if his new defensive coordinator, D'Anton Lynn, kind of stepped in and gave USC an actual defense. We acknowledge that that possibility at least exists. I do believe, though, at this point, entering year 8 as a head coach, Lincoln Riley is going to get cooked when stuff like this comes out, perhaps even worse than when he cooked that brisket. All right. If you haven't, please leave us a 5-star review. Would absolutely love it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Saturday Down South on YouTube, where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the STS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.